Okay, so it looks like we had some technical difficulties. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but we are gonna hop right. Let's see. Let's see if I can get Barb back in here. Should be awesome. There she
Hey
is.
there.
Yes,
Oh,
I don't know what happened there.
I
Okay.
don't sure. I was seeing people continuing to add on and hearts floating up, so I thought maybe that meant that you were frozen and I wasn't, so I kept talking.
I see. I see. And did I end the video on you then?
I don't know. I don't know what happened. And then I was like, oh, you were spinning and all that kind of stuff.
Oh
So
my
should we
goodness.
start from the beginning then, just in case?
Yeah, I think we should start from the beginning. Oh gosh, it's always
Okay.
something technology, right?
Right,
So,
right.
hello again, everyone. This is our second episode of Boundaries and Finances, Basic 102. This is a four-part series on IG Live where we're going to talk about the principles of boundaries and how they apply to your finances. I am Chantel Garcia, and I am the owner and founder of Innovative Consulting and Solution. I work with entrepreneurs, executives, and not-for-profit leaders to help them build boundary systems and to help them manage their finances. Today, joining me is Barb of Higher Power Coaching. And Barb, if you can please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So I do want to say that a little thing popped up that said invitation expired, and that happened last time too. So I hope that doesn't mean we're going to lose what we've had. So anyway, I'm
Yes.
going to keep going. Hi, everybody. I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I provide coaching on healthy boundaries I have a private coaching program, and then I also do group coaching. I forgot to mention before, I have a private membership community called Secure, Loved, and Brave. And then I am the host of the podcast Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. It's a weekly podcast that are 10 to 20 minutes long. Whether you're in 12-step recovery or not, doesn't matter. There's probably helpful stuff there. And just launched my 120th episode on Sunday, so it's been around for a while. It comes out every week on Mondays. Um,
Yay! Virtual
I hope
confetti.
you listen. It's available on just about every podcast outlet you can possibly imagine. So today we're doing some more basics on boundaries, and what we're going to talk about today is principles about boundaries. And one of the things that Chantel and I figured out, which is why we're doing this, is that principles around personal boundaries often also equate to principles around financial boundaries.
Yes.
I think we're going to be talking more about the personal stuff today. Last week
Mhm.
we did a little bit, it was probably pretty even between personal boundaries and financial boundaries,
Yes.
but
Definitely.
hopefully they'll help you in such a way um, that you'll be able to translate the information to your financial boundaries. And one of the things that I found out personally is that when I developed healthier boundaries as an individual in my personal life, that my boundaries in every area of my life got a lot stronger. So I think, if you could use some help shoring up your boundaries or even learning how to form them in the first place, the stuff we're going to talk about today should help you and also help you with your finances. So, do you want to say more before I start talking about these principles?
Sure, absolutely. It so I definitely want to do a recap, right? I think you did a
Oh, good
very
idea.
really
Yeah,
good overview of
yeah.
what we're going to discuss. And I think
Hmm.
it's also important to do like a recap of the first episode with
Hmm.
what are boundaries, right? And
Hmm.
there are limits and rules that we set for ourselves, right?
Hmm.
And so it helps us manage our money in our these boundaries helps us manage various things, including managing our money, our personal finances, and our business finances. And then it also helps us make choices ahead of time on how we want to live our life, right? We talked a lot about that last week. And you also talked about that how we are very teachable individuals, which is very important because at times we think we're set in our ways and we are who we are and that's it. We can't change when in fact you can. And so you
Hey,
can also
Jennifer.
Hi. So you can also use tools like YNAB or even a spreadsheet to create a budget and to
Mhm.
help you manage your finances and make better decisions, right? And more informed decisions. So
Mhm.
now that we've covered the basics last week, like Barb said, we're going to jump into the principles this week and take it away, Barb. You are
All
full of
right.
knowledge and information, and we are here to share with the people.
Um, And one of the things that I want to say to people is that I was 52 years old when I got into 12-step recovery, and I really learned how to form boundaries in 12-step recovery, and it was all of it. And so I don't care how old you are, it is never too late. And the other thing I want to say is that after I started forming and actually had some pretty decent boundaries, I started reading about boundaries, which meant I started to understand them intellectually after understanding them experientially. And I think this is what makes me such a great coach on helping people with boundaries, because I get them here and I get them here. And I know what it feels like to have shitty boundaries, including to have your finances be a mess. So, one other recap item from last week, I declared bankruptcy in 1999 when my student loans came due because I had racked up so much credit card debt for my second time. And by 2008, I bought a home. So I don't care how bad your financial ship is, you can turn that ship around. So as Chantel said, you're teachable. You can learn how to have healthy boundaries and you can learn how to have healthy finances, whether it's in your personal life or in your business.
Right.
So the first thing that I want to talk about in terms of boundaries is that they're yours. You own them and you're in charge of enforcing them. So you don't just set a boundary and expect everybody's going to respect it. Most of the time, when people don't respect our boundaries, it's because it's new. Like they're like, you were never like that before. Like they almost don't believe you or they forget. And it's your job to train them. So you have to set consequences. And so most of the time, with normal people, you're just going to say, like, let's say I decided I wanted people to start knocking on my office door before they came in. So I might say, please knock before you come in. I asked you to knock before I come in. Would you please knock before I come in? You know, you mostly just repeat the same thing over and over again. And then sometimes you have to kick it up a notch. But the idea is you're in charge of the boundary. So I've told them the boundary is knocking on my door before they come in the office. But if they keep coming in my office and not knocking on the door, that's on me, not on them. They're not in charge of enforcing it.
Mm.
And we have to remind them over and over again. So in this case, the consequence is I repeat myself over and over and over again. Now, if it gets to the point where they've done it a number of times and they're clearly not listening, I might say, excuse me, I don't think you heard me. I want you to knock before you come in. So I'm going to ask you to walk out the door and then knock before coming back in. That's going to be very difficult for someone to forget,
Right.
after, right? So the consequence is that you kind of walk them through the behavior that you want. So I could talk for hours and hours and hours on consequences. But the thing about consequences is that boundaries are clear and specific. That's why it's called a boundary. They're not murky. So you need to be clear in your communication. I think the thing that people fear the most is direct communication when they're learning to set boundaries. They say, give me the words. They want the words to say because they know that they're going to fumble and cave and, and not follow through with it. But
Right.
what a lot of us do is we imply things or we beat around the bush. Well, beating around the bush is not how you set boundaries. You come right out and say, I'd like you to knock on the door before you come in, right? And I will also say another thing people are afraid of is that people will think that they're mean or something like that, or that they're going to become mean. I have really healthy boundaries and I do it in a very loving way almost all the time because I love myself, which is why I'm, establishing these boundaries. But I also, before I had boundaries, I called myself a volunteeraholic. So I volunteered for all kinds of things. And when I got into recovery, I quit all of that. And I was like, you know who I'm volunteering for? I'm volunteering for Barb.
Right.
And I now give way more service to the community than I ever did before because I have healthy boundaries. And it comes from a place of abundance rather than a place of lack. And I mean that for two reasons. One, it comes from a place of abundance because my cup is full, because I fill my cup first. And two, it comes from a place of abundance rather than lack in that I didn't know this, but I was like helping people to be like me, like me, like me, like me. And so I was lacking something, which was I wanted more to be liked more. And here's the thing, I like me more now. because I tell the truth and I set healthy boundaries and I take care of myself. So I don't need you to like me. I want you to,
Mm.
but if you don't like me, and I'm not grasping, so it's not coming from lack in that regard as well.
Bar,
So
before
be,
you,
yeah,
sorry, before you jump, like, there's a couple of things I wanted to jump back to the implying and not beating around the bush and being very direct. I think
mhm,
that's very key because a lot of times, to
absolutely,
your point, we're so afraid of setting boundaries because we're afraid of what other people think and how we hurt their feelings, right? And so we're willing to sacrifice our own feelings and how we feel
right.
for the comfort of others.
Yeah.
And so that is present in many areas. And I've
Yeah.
personally had to learn how to
Mhm.
deal with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Naturally, I've always grown up to be a people pleaser, high
Mhm.
achiever, all those overachiever, blah, blah, blah. And just learn that over time I was beat down and tired because I spent so much time pleasing others and
Mhm.
other, like you said, filling your cup.
Mhm.
And I think there's nothing wrong with being very direct and being explicit, right,
Mhm.
about what you need in order to
Mhm.
make a relationship work, whether it be a friendship
Right.
relationship, a co-working with someone, whatever it may be. But
Yeah.
setting boundaries, because honestly, a lot of other people have no issue, don't have an issue setting a boundary with you. So you
Right.
really shouldn't have an issue setting
Right.
a boundary with
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
And the
Agreed.
and the second piece too about filling your cup and having more time to volunteer. You know, I dwelled on that a bit. Like I really spent some time thinking about that when you first said it to me. And I actually share that with my best friend too. And so we ended up having a whole conversation about it. And for me, my takeaway from that is really time management too. Is
Yeah.
your capacity to do things, because if I am managing my time and setting those boundaries, right? And really doing things within those times and those boundaries, I will have the capacity to then give time to other people. Yes,
Right.
like
Yes.
yes, self-love,
Yeah.
exactly, right? So you have
Absolutely.
I tell people all the time, they're like, "Hey, why can't you do this? But this is so important." I'm like, "Here are my
Yeah.
priorities." And I've said this. My
Yeah.
priorities will always be God, my
Yeah.
family, taking
Yeah.
care of myself, and then whatever I have left,
Mhm.
right, I will
Mhm.
give you.
Yeah.
But I cannot pour from an empty cup at all.
Right.
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 So thank you
Exactly.
for saying that. That's
Yeah.
so important. So
So
important.
then a couple of things you said. This is why I love doing this because it's
Yes.
we're
That's
like
why we
looking
love
at some
talking
things.
to
Like
each
we
other.
have an
Yeah.
outline, but like there's so many things. One, you said, we're afraid to hurt other people's feelings, yet we're hurting our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So like keep that in mind, people. You don't have to be the thing that absorbs all of the negative consequences, things around you, you
Right.
know. And then the other thing I want to say, there's a distinction between hurting and harming someone.
Mm.
This is really important. You might hurt someone's feelings, but you're not harming them. So, two examples. It might hurt you to use a needle to get a splinter out of your finger, but it's not going to harm you. In fact, it's going to heal you. It might hurt you to get your teeth
Mm.
drilled by the dentist, but it's not going to harm you. In fact, it's going to heal you.
Right.
So, it might hurt someone's feelings to set boundaries with them, but it's not going to harm them. In fact, it's probably going to heal you and it may even heal your relationship with them because you're being honest with them and they get to see who you really are and what you really want, like, think, and feel. There's a lot of talk out there about being authentic.
Mm.
If you don't have healthy boundaries, you are not authentic.
Authentic.
You can't do it.
Sorry.
You can't do
Nope.
it.
Nope.
You know, you
That
can't
is
do it.
so true. That's so
Yeah.
true. Setting expectations, really,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Those expectations are those boundaries. And if
Right.
you are clear about what those expectations are from the beginning, you're going to have a healthy relationship with whomever it is, whether it be in a romantic relationship, your friendships, like I said, your relationships with your coworkers at work, even
Yeah.
setting a boundary about when you should send me emails, or
Yeah.
no, if you send them to me, I'm not going to respond.
Right.
Don't
Right.
call me after a certain time regarding
Yeah.
work, right? And that's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Well, and the boundary is if you don't want people to call you after a certain time, you don't answer.
Don't
That's
answer.
right, that's on you. But the other thing I want to say you said about the time is like one of the things I talk about is we have resources, love, money, time, and energy,
Mm.
and those are ours to take care of. And so I used to give my time away to people all the time. So time is my most precious resource because I could generate more love, more energy, and more
Mm.
time, not money, sorry, not time. I can't generate more time. So
Right.
I'm very protective, and it's one of the ways in which I am the tightest around my boundaries, and it's how I manage my boundaries most is with my time. So that was really a good point. Um, Another principle I want to move on to talking about is what I call boundaries of self-containment. I
Mm-hmm.
also talk about boundaries of self-protection. I'm not going to talk about those today. But for me, I think these were the types of boundaries that had the greatest impact on my life. So when I say boundaries of self-containment, I mean, what do you need to contain or stop doing that you weren't doing before? So some people might call these internal boundaries. I think they're a little bit different than that. But if you walk around thinking that the whole world is what needs to change, or I'm not good at my finances, or this is just the way that I am, a lot of it that you need to contain are your thoughts. So some of the things that I needed to stop doing were I needed to stop the negative self-talk. So as soon as I started it and noticed it, it's my job to stop it, right? I have to contain that stuff. I needed to, so that was something that harmed me. But then there are other things I needed to contain that harm other people. For example, I gave lots of unsolicited advice to people. Meanwhile, I couldn't run one area of my life well, but I was going around telling people how to fix their lives, especially their relationships, which is hilarious because
Oh,
I'm now finally in a really super healthy, awesome relationship. But I was 55 when I met him and I had a string of dysfunctional relationships. So I needed to contain my unsolicited advice. Gossip is another thing that I needed to contain. And then in regard to my finances, I needed to contain my unbridled spending. I needed to stop doing that. I needed to stop burying my head in the sand with my finances. That's what I would do. When I first started working at Yale University in the late 90s and I got paid monthly. I'd never been paid monthly before, and it was a huge adjustment for me. So what would happen is I would get my paycheck and I would do like go shopping and buy whatever I wanted and needed because it was like I was in this lack mode and scarcity mode because I hadn't been paid for a month. And then when I sat down to pay my bills, well, I didn't have enough money to pay my bills.
so you're
So I had to
backwards,
continue
right?
not to pay
Priorities.
for it. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're waiting for someone else to come along, like for me, what I found was a gigantic proportion of the difficulty in my life came from me and things that I was doing. So boundaries are of self-containment are things that we need to do for ourselves. And so we're learning how to focus on what we can control. So you might think this is just the way that I am with my finances, but as Chantel said earlier, you're teachable. You
Teachable.
can learn and you can change.
And a big
So
piece of that too, Barb, is being honest, right? Being honest with
absolutely.
yourself. Honesty.
Yeah,
Because at times, yeah, we paint ourselves as the victim. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know why this is happening. It's, well, you're the root cause of what is happening, right?
yeah. So Vanessa's saying she sees setting boundaries as part of self-love. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then Achieving Dreams LLC. I know who that is, but I can't think who it is. That's
Yes,
so
that's
true.
Arlene. Yes, achieving
Yeah.
dreams. Yes. Hi,
Okay.
Arlene.
Yeah. Oh, I see Rosa joined
Hi,
us.
Rosa. Hey.
Yeah.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
it's really about that honesty. I know, right? Hey,
Also, if
ladies.
anybody has questions, be sure to plop them in there. And
Yes,
we're going to be
please.
coming back. We have two more sessions the next two Tuesdays. The one next week is going to be
Down to
finances and boundaries and finances and relationships. And then
relationships.
the one after that is going to be boundaries and finances and business. Let me see what time. So we have 10 more minutes. The other principle I want to talk about is how boundaries let the good in and
Hmm.
they keep the bad out.
Yes.
So what do I mean by that? So if you are someone who doesn't let people help you, who doesn't take compliments, who won't accept praise, you don't have healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries means we have a right-sized understanding of who we are, which, I know that you're a God person, I'm a God person. We are all children of God. You were created on purpose, by love, in love, for love. It doesn't matter whether you believe that or not, it's the truth. And so you don't let love in if you're not allowing people to praise you, if you're not allowing people to support you, if you're not allowing people to give you compliments or to help you. And one of the ways that you want to let the good in with financial boundaries is, for example, hiring a financial thought partner, like Chantel. So if you can't manage your finances on your own right now, then let some help in
Right.
and let somebody help you. And so Chantel works primarily with businesses, but if you need help, she can funnel you to someone else if it's with your personal finances. So before I talk about keeping the bad out, do you want to say more about like healthy boundaries allows us to let the good in?
Absolutely. So I'll use the example that you just mentioned as far as being asking for help. That's a part of being honest, right? About what we lack and what not necessarily lack, but what our skills are, what are our strengths. If your strength is not managing your finances, then be honest about that and ask for help. And don't be embarrassed about it because it is common, number one, and not everyone is good at it. Even growing up at myself, I have a major in accounting, both undergrad and my master's degree. And it took me a while, right, to really apply those same principles to my personal finances.
Mhm.
It's not something that I grew up knowing about, which we will talk about more, in the next episode. But, I was honest with myself about it. And I sat down and said, okay, well, first off, you make good money. At the time, I didn't have any kids, right? But I was eating out a lot. I was going out with partying, whatever it may be. But because of the field that I'm in, I made good money for my age. And so I had to learn how to reel it in. My solution to everything was always, I need to make more money. No, I need to live within my means, reel it in, and see how to budget my money. How can I save? How can I put money into my retirement, my 401k, buy stocks, all those different things? So, one is being honest about it. So, it's either you take charge and really sitting down to learn how to manage your finances, or you find someone that can help you and let that positivity in.
I love that expression, reel it in. That's perfect. I'm totally stealing that from now on when I talk about boundaries.
Reel
I'm
it
saying, what
in,
do you
reel it
mean?
in, Barb.
Reel it in. Like,
Reel
reel it in.
it
What do you mean to reel it in? Right,
in.
right,
Reel
right.
it
Yeah.
in.
So the other thing that healthy boundaries do besides letting the good in is they keep the bad out.
Yes.
So for me, um, I drank really heavily and smoked a lot of weed and, ate a lot. I was over 100 pounds higher than I am now and just really abused the crap out of myself. So those were things I needed to contain and stop doing. But I also hung out with people like that. So when I say keep the bad out, I'm like, okay, are these people a good influence on me, a neutral influence, or a bad influence on me? And I've heard it said that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what that makes me think of is who's rubbing off on me? Who am I hanging out with? What environments? Like, I don't go to bars. There's
Mm-hmm.
no reason for me to go to a bar. And then if we want to talk about like keeping the bad out, in terms of our finances, living within our means is one of those things. So what I used to do was I would just use credit cards and not look at the statement, right? And so is that keeping the I'm like, I feel like what I was keeping out was like I had blinders on to my to what was going on. And so I guess this isn't really working in terms of the metaphor of keeping things out. Like, another way to say it is like I got overcharged for things, for example, and I didn't know it
Mm.
because I wasn't paying attention to my finances. Or if you have a small business and you are not paying attention to your finances, you could be embezzled by. So the way to keep the overchargers away from you or the people taking advantage of your business or the embezzlers out is to put boundaries of self-protection in place. And so that would mean things like having a bookkeeper and then somebody who audits the bookkeeper or
Mm.
something like that. And so you don't want to make yourself vulnerable. That's what boundaries of self-protection do. So if there are areas of your life, whether they have to do with your finances or your personal body or your emotional life, what do you need to put in place to protect yourself? So let's see. Vanessa saying, how can I create boundaries at home? I do business in my home office, and I feel like I'm imposing on my home. It is imposing
Home.
on my home remaining my sanctuary.
Girl.
So I can tell you precisely how I did it. So I used to work all over the house. I made an office, and I live alone, so I'm not in a situation you guys, but you, Chantel, and Vanessa have kids. I shut the door at night
Hmm.
to my office. I literally close the door. That's one of the ways that I do it. I could say more, but you have a family, so
Yes.
you probably have a lot more to say
So the
about
first
that.
thing I said was girl. Ooh. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm still personally working on that boundary. I'm not perfect and I'm still working on it. I actually just had a conversation with my husband about possibly renting out a co-working space, possibly at Known or somewhere close by. Yeah, because I do have an office, but it's in our family room. The kids don't come down here often. But it's still like if someone does laundry, they kind of like leave it right there. And I'm just like, this is my space. What are you doing? And fighting
Yeah.
with that space and talking about that boundary. I need this area cleared so I can think clearly. And so unfortunately that's not working. You can't explain that to a 1 or 2 year old or 3 year old, right? But the solution is, and two, just being flexible about it, right? If that boundary does not work and you can't work around that, then for me, creating a new boundary would be all right. Well, then I'm taking my stuff and I'm maybe renting out an office.
Yeah.
But looking at my other boundary tool, which is my budget, to see how can I afford that and if that's realistic. Right. So not just going and jumping in to do it. Does that work for my business? And does that fit within the boundaries of my operating budget too?
Right.
So that's the other piece to it as well. I wish there was a simple answer, but I will say, it is pretty tough. It really is. But
Yeah,
I would
and,
say just look at your budget and see what your options are. Someone actually shared with me, actually Layla, I don't know if she's still on here, but she said that she works from home and she has like the air purifier with the scents. And when it's time to work, she has one scent. And when it's time to not work or kind of do her thing, she has another scent. And that's how she transitions between the two.
nice. I love
So that may be
that.
helpful there. Me personally, if we want to talk about even outside of just like the space itself, how do we just turn off of work, right? I would say just even turning off your email and trying to get away from it. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm working on it, Vanessa.
Yeah, I don't have my work email on my phone. But I will also say, like one of the things that you said that I think is super important is being flexible. So some people think boundaries are like walls. They're not. They're more like fences with gates in them.
Yeah.
And you're the gatekeeper. You're the one that decides what gets in and what gets out. And the thing about boundaries is we talked about this last week. You make educated guesses of this is where I think I want the boundary to be. With your budget, which is a financial boundary, you make an educated guess of where I want the boundary to be. And then you try it out and you see, how does that feel? Does that feel right to me? And if it does, then yay, that's my boundary. But if it doesn't, you're like, it needs to be a little weaker, it needs to be a little stronger, that sort of thing. And then I love the Layla's example because that's her own for herself. I'm
Right.
telling myself that my boundary is I'm done. My transition time is over. The other thing, if you have like say you had an area of your living room and you had a desk and it what literally wasn't boundaried, you could buy a room divider and have that be a physical boundary so that you're not looking at work and it's not spilling over into the rest of your home. And, it could be that that some of what Vanessa's talking about isn't just a physical boundary, but also like the psychic one that we're kind of getting into of like, am I done with work at this point in time? Like I definitely finish, I work at all different kinds of times of day, but I schedule it ahead of time. So that's another thing about boundaries. We decide about them ahead of time. Same thing with a budget. You decide ahead of time, how do I want to live? And then you try it out. You try out your educated guess with your boundary and you see how that feels. And the reason we want to decide ahead of time is because we're not going to be making decisions out of like anxiety or fear if we make
Yeah.
them ahead of time.
Right.
So if you like things come to you get into a crunch period or you get, particularly stressed about something, you go by what did you say the boundary was going to be? You do that. And then later, when you're not stressed, you assess and say, how did that boundary work for me?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was the budget boundary or some other thing.
Right.
But I think for me, I chunk my time and I work during those times. And so I see my sweetheart Chuck 3 nights a week. And when I'm with him, I am with him. I am not working. I just don't. It's just that's what I do. So that's,
I love that,
physical
Barb.
boundaries are a lot easier,
Mm-hmm.
and physical boundaries help us enforce the psychic boundaries, but hopefully that's helpful. I do see that we're a couple minutes past 2, so
Yes.
I've
But
talked a
before
lot, so say
Yes,
stuff.
but no, I love what you said about being present. That is
Mhm.
really a good boundary, right? Being present. I would speak, yes, to being present for my husband whenever we have downtime, whenever that is. It doesn't really exist with 3 kids, but even being present with my kids, right? Not listening to my daughter or watching her do something while scrolling on Facebook, like putting the
Right,
phone down, not paying attention to whatever that electronic is or whatever, and being present and
mhm,
giving the eye contact and actually
right,
repeating what you heard from them to reinforce or confirm and
right,
affirm that you've actually heard them and you are paying
yeah,
attention.
mhm,
That's really big. Look at us.
right,
We could actually talk
yeah,
through a whole other IG series
yeah,
on that
yeah,
being
yeah.
present, right?
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, and I think what I've really come to understand, both through my own work on boundaries and coaching people about boundaries, is that learning healthy boundaries is, I think of it as like I've learned the boundary of Barb. Where
Right.
does Barb end and begin? What is the authentic Barb? Like discovering who am I really, and then communicating that to other people.
Right.
So, they boundaries permeate every single area of our lives.
Right. Right.
Well, we
I
should
love that.
probably wrap up here.
Yes, we should. We should. I'm
Okay.
very excited about next week's episode, boundaries and finances in relationships, which is a huge topic.
Yeah,
Whether it be a relationship with your friends, yourself, your friends, even relationships with people in your church, right? We talk about tithes and offering, people
yeah.
relationships with your significant other. How do you two manage your finances, whether
Or your
you live
parents,
together or not, and
or your
even with your parents?
siblings.
So we
Yeah.
have a lot to cover next week, Barb. We may
Okay.
have to make it an hour long. I don't know, but we may go over our time. So we're forewarning everyone now, but there's a lot to unpack there. And I think everyone will appreciate it and relate to what we have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and the week after that, which will be our last, is
Yeah.
boundaries and finances in business. So that's going to be mostly Chantel. But
Yes.
thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And
The
if you have
questions.
questions that come up in between, DM either one of us,
Yes.
and make sure we answer them next week. But thank you so much, Chantel.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone. Thanks for
Bye,
joining us.
everybody.
Have
Thanks
a
for
great
joining.
day.
Yeah.
Bye.